Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everyone.
It is an unsettling day. DMZ tries to be about peace and harmony, but it's a little difficult when there's uprising in the streets.
But Bill, I would say I think there is something good that I'm seeing out there amid all of the horrific, imagery and news, and that is, for now at least, I feel like there is a consensus amongst whites and blacks, conservatives and liberals, that the Eric Garner case was that there is injustice, and that is not nothing. That is something, and I think that's a case for me of why video and police body cams would have a salutary impact.
Well, I think there's a debate about the body cams now because there are cameras about the Garner case that don't seem to have gotten the desired result. But to your first point, we had a sense with the Ferguson Michael Brown case that the traditional ideological and racial lines were redividing, where conservatives and other whites seemed to be saying, look, Michael Brown there was an altercation with the police officer. The Wilson was justified. This is not a clear-cut case at all. More eager use of the term thug being thrown around, which on the left is saying thug is the new N-word. So that was all, not terribly conducive to good race relations. But I think this is different. This seems to be so clear-cut. I mean, at the bare minimum, worthy of trial. I mean, I would certainly agree with the Ferguson case. That's certainly worthy of trial too. You get enough conflicting testimony that it should have gone to trial. But even more so with clear-cut video and clear-cut violation of on the books NYPD police procedures.
Right.
I think you could say the Ferguson case, even if common sense should have had Darren Wilson restrain himself, legally speaking, I imagine having that initial altercation in the car probably gave Wilson a whole lot of legal leeway. This is a direct violation of stated procedures as far as we know. And one thing that's also different about the Staten Island case is we know nothing about what happened inside the grand jury. We got a telling of the grand jury proceedings. Okay, we released the whole transcript. I think there was a lot of games being played by the Ferguson prosecutor in that he didn't have the gumption to make the call himself and punted it to a grand jury and then manipulated the grand jury with cherry-picked evidence and leaned on them to turn back a non-indictment. But at least at the end of the day, at least he showed you the work. He showed you what he did. We don't have that with Staten Island, and it flies in the face of what is, it's not grainy video. It's not hard to make out video. It's pretty straightforward what happened there. So it does at least has the effect of unifying. It seems to be, I guess, everybody outside of Staten Island. I see Congressman Michael Grimm, the indicted Congressman Michael Grimm, is supporting the non-indictment of the police officer in this case.
Peter King too, I believe.
Peter King, right?
But look, I mean, here's
the Archie Bunker New York conservatives are back in town.
I do worry. I think that it's very good that there is this unity, that we're speaking with one voice and condemning what at the minimum looks like manslaughter to me, and injustice. I do worry that that's tenuous, and I worry that, for example, if the Al Sharptons of the world hype this, the racial angle of this, that there could be, we could sort of return to our respective corners, and then you would see, I mean, we're already seeing some conservatives kind of changing the subject. I think this, to me, the narrative isn't about race specifically. I think it's about police abuse, which is clearly a problem. I think this is. I'm guessing it's vastly more likely that these sort of things happen to African Americans, but this could happen to one of our children. I mean, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I've personally witnessed the arrogant side of police officers. And so, if you're a white kid with a Grateful Dead bumper sticker and you mouth off to a cop, I don't think it's inconceivable. It's probably much less likely, but I don't think inconceivable something like this could happen to you. So to me, this is about the police. We need to reform the police. We need the body cams. This cannot stand. But I do worry that something could happen to sort of break this unity. I mean, this is what we had with this right now. What we're seeing is more tantamount to the civil rights era, where there's some bipartisan unanimity on this issue, but tribalism can creep in very easily. And, I already see some conservatives making these arguments. Well, this was about cigarette taxes, or this is about too many laws on the books. Well, all those things may be true, but really secondary at best issues. That's not what this case is about. And don't be surprised, Bill. I would not be surprised if Eric Garner or something, if some blogger or somebody were to dig up something about him. He may not be a Boy Scout, but that doesn't mean he had this coming to him at all. But this case,
he should have been arrested for breaking the law about cigarette sales. I mean, that doesn't mean that he
right.
needs to die. I mean, the whole question is, when people are in violation of the law, what is the proper recourse? And the vast majority of cases, it's not gunning them down in the streets.
Right, and by the way, now we still, even though this video, as you mentioned, it's not grainy, we still, I don't know that I've seen a couple different videos, but I don't know that we know everything surrounding this. Now, to me, nothing excuses what we do know. But what I'd like to know, was there an attempt to arrest him, to ask, did they ask him, put your hands out so we can handcuff you? Was that not part of the video? Because all I saw was them talking to him and then one of them going up from behind and putting a chokehold on him. That seems like not the best first move. That's like not your go-to move, right? That's
the part that there is a violation of NYPD procedures. They are not supposed to use chokeholds. So it doesn't matter what the guy was doing. They're not by their own rules supposed to do that in response.
Well, okay, I can see that point to you, but if he had been taking punches at a couple of cops, you might have a little latitude. But that didn't happen. There was nothing physically that provoked this being the first move that you make. So anyway, my hope is that something good comes from this horrible thing, and that we have, justice for Eric Garner and also some reforms for police officers to protect all of us. I think it's a mistake to think that this couldn't happen. This is a problem for all of us, and not only because we should all be concerned about humanity in general, but because we could potentially all be victims of this. Some people, I'm sure, will laugh at that, and they'll attack me for saying that. But even if I'm wrong, I think it's healthier for us to assume that I'm right.
Well, and I would imagine all the work that Radley Balco, who's now at the Washington Post, and he comes out of libertarian circles. And his entire beat is excessive use of force by the police. I don't believe that every story he's written has always been about African American victims. I think he's got stories with all kinds of victims.
But I'm guessing that what happens is African American victims may be more likely to be victimized for sort of standing around on a street corner and having police come up, as opposed to the white victims might be more likely the cop kicks their door in the middle of the night with a no-knock raid, and they have some sort of a scuffle, meth labs, things like that. I'm guessing that it's more, the whole driving while black phenomenon. I'm guessing it's more dangerous to be black.
I'm arguing that there's no racial component to this issue. I personally think that there is, but you certainly can widen the lens to talk about other elements of examples of excessive police force that go beyond just these particular cases where African American males are being gunned down or choked in the streets.
The bottom line is, I think we all have a stake in getting this right, and I think that the hope should be that something good can come from this horrible incident, and I think that how protesters and civil rights leaders handle this issue in the next 24 to 48 hours will be very important in determining whether or not this becomes a cause that unites all of us or divides us.
I think in the end it's going to be the former, and I suspect we lack data here, and I think people have pointed out that even though there are laws in the books that the police department should be providing data, that they're not. So that itself is a problem. But just as a gut sense, I would imagine this is not on the upswing. This sort of thing has sort of been happening, for a while. We had Rodney King and we had Diallo in New York. And we've always had incidents like this. We've had this sort of weird cluster events with Ferguson and Garner and the young boy in Cleveland. But while it might feel like a trend in the media, I would imagine the aggregate it probably isn't. But it's a situation where one is too many.
Well,
but I do think it's probably different is that our reaction to it is much more stronger.
How many people over the years have been disappeared or resisting arrest? I'm using air quotes. Or we have no way of knowing how many of these things, thousands, tens of thousands, or whatever of these incidents have happened over the years, and you just take the police's word for it. Bill, if a cop pulls you over and says that you were going, 20 miles over the speed limit and you weren't, and you go to traffic court, they will take the cop's word over yours every time. That's just how it goes. And, you think in the 21st century, maybe we can get past that point where, and let me just say too, I think we do have to respect the difficult work that police officers have. I sit at my computer in a pretty safe office. They're out there and they could be shot at and all sorts of things, but still, there's just no excuse for this, and there's no reason why we can't fix this going forward.
Well, I think because the popular reaction is so strong, and I think less divided than it has been in the past. I gotta think that by and large, your average police chief is saying, "I don't want this. I don't want the riot in my town. I want to go the extra mile to avoid this kind of spectacle because it's not going to be conducive to me doing my job in keeping our streets safe." So if there is a problem bubbling up in my department, I darn well am going to do something to get ahead of the curve and deal with it. Yeah. And I think a lot of police divisions have already done this. We're at a point where our sensitivities are different, so when it does happen, even if it doesn't happen a lot, it happens enough that we get maximum outrage about it, as we should. I wonder, and I think that's gonna help drive the numbers down even further going forward. That's my guess.
I suspect it's hard. I don't know the answer to this, but I suspect it's hard to find cops these days. Little boys grow up probably still, admiring police, and there's, whether it's playing cops and robbers or whatever, there is a exciting, heroic, romantic side to it, but seems like a pretty bad, not the best career move, in terms of the amount of money you make, the prestige you get, and the fact that people are shooting at you, and then the fact that, I would imagine that incidents like this make it even harder to recruit good cops because, why would anybody want to be a part of an organization like this? So it just, and then you have the types of people. I mean, if you're not getting the cream of the crop, if you're not getting the best and the brightest, because they don't want to be cops because of all the reasons I just explained, then what kind of people do want to be cops? I think it really breaks down. It's sort of half and half. I mean, there's people who really want to make a difference and are really want to protect and serve and are very purpose driven, and there's people who like to drive fast and carry a badge and and a gun. I mean,
I think there's always going to be people that want to be cops. I don't think you ever take away that glamorous aspect of it. I think in many respects these are good paying jobs. There's a decline of good paying jobs. In working class communities, and this is steady pay with good pensions. You get to retire early. You're not changing your desk all day.
My dad was a correctional officer. My father-in-law used to be a police officer. One of my uncles was a detective. I mean, these you're right. I mean, from a middle class, to blue collar sort of background, these, being a prison, my dad being a prison guard put me through college and, helped put me through college and put food on the table.
Right. So
those were good jobs,
Right. I mean, you sort of could get to a point where people say that it's not worth it because, either because the criticisms you get are too much, or you feel there's too many rules and regulations, I can't do my job properly, and maybe you get some of that. But there is a way to do this job under a set of guidelines. I mean, there are plenty of guidelines as it stands, and it's not trying to just save the lives of the people you might be trying to arrest. It's also trying to save you, a lifetime of heartache and carrying the burden of having known that you took a life unnecessarily. I mean, these are guidelines that should make everybody feel more safe and secure. I mean, in Darren Wilson's case, for example, I mean, we have this trend towards using tasers and not guns, which, some folks on the left complain that the tasers are bad too. But I think everyone would say, look, whatever the problem with a taser, it's going to beat, getting shot and killed.
Some of those people do die from the tasers, though, too. I mean, look, the problem, if Eric Garner weren't an asthmatic, the chokehold probably wouldn't have killed him. Okay, that does not in any way excuse what they did. But there are people who have heart conditions or other conditions that get tased.
I mean, there's always going to be certain,
taser could kill them.
I mean, there's always potential for fluke things to occur. And like, if other people, I'm not putting myself out as an expert on the subject. If there are better things than tasers that are out there,
the problem with the taser is, I think that, like, once you have the taser, and you think, well, this won't kill anybody, you're going to be a little bit maybe trigger happy to tase somebody. Bro.
Well, and I think these things need to be put on the proper settings. They still need to be used judiciously. I mean, there need to be guidelines about how you use them. But Darren Wilson's statement on something was, it was too bulky, I didn't want to carry it around. I mean, that kind of delegation down to the police officer what weapons you are carrying. I only had lethal force available to me because I thought the taser was too uncomfortable to carry. That strikes me as a bad policy. If we're going to have policies that are designed to accost people without life-threatening force, then follow through and make it necessary for the cops to actually carry those things around. This idea that they can just sort of make their own audible on what they're carrying, I find weird.
Well, I think that what you're saying makes a lot of sense. I mean, I can't really argue with that. So, if I can't argue with it, then what good are we?
Well, back to less tragic news. Your party is trying to figure out how to keep the government open, and I got to say something that I predicted early on before the midterms, that as soon as Republicans took Congress, they would be immediately struggling with having to actually carry out the basic functions of government without looking like morons. It does seem that they're going to keep the government open this month, so I give them credit for that. But it's still a little messy how they're getting there. And it's some Republicans looks like they're going to break off. They're going to need some Democratic votes to get this bill through. Ted Cruz is out there calling this a meaningless show vote. because they're having a separate vote to protest Obama's immigration order that's not tied to the funding directly. So Ted Cruz is out there undermining Boehner's authority on that subject. And what's that?
Zara Cartman would call it authorita. I like that version better.
And the way that Boehner is structuring this is, we'll fund the government through September, which is the end of the fiscal year. But we won't fund Homeland Security that far. It seems like they're going to do it through maybe only until January. I think only as far along as March. I don't think we've seen the final language yet. So we can have a separate spending fight about Homeland Security vis-a-vis immigration in the next year. And that strikes me as sort of an odd move too, because you obviously don't have the juice to stop the order itself, and the actual implementation of the deportation relief program is through an agency that's funded by fees and not by appropriated congressional dollars. So there's nothing that Congress can cut off. I mean, they could pass a law sort of banning the agency or something like that, but that's obviously not going to get through the Senate, with or Obama's veto pen. So they're left with defunding Homeland Security altogether. That's their threat. You don't repeal your order, we're going to stop securing the homeland. We're going to stop border security. It just strikes you. It's just an admission that you have zero leverage. All you're doing is embarrassing yourself by taking it to that level. You don't have something that's going to make Obama feel bad if you follow through. It's going to make you look more juvenile and reckless. So I can only foresee them having to stand down again in a few months and just dragging out this whole subject. So not only does that make them look bad as far as their governing capabilities are concerned, but it also hampers them from being able to put forth what their own agenda is. Here's what we want to do. Here's how we would make the country better. Here's how we would create jobs. Here we would solve immigration. They can't seem to get there because Obama has been very crafty and immediately set the agenda from the get-go ever since Election Day.
Well, and they fall for it. They take the bait every time, and that's
right.
So it's it's one half him being crafty and one half them being stupid. They're crafty. I think, I don't know what it is. I always have these references pop into my head when you say things. All right, so I guess the first thing I ought to say is I understand the frustration of these Republicans, because I do think that what Obama did was needlessly provocative and potentially unconstitutional, and if you do care about the rule of law and the balance of power, then it's very alarming what he did, and unfortunately, the only recourse they have, I think, is the power of the purse. That's really the only thing they can do. And so it's understandable the temptation to do this. But I agree with you in the sense that don't get mad, don't get ahead. Like, this doesn't get them anywhere. God forbid, what if there were some sort of a terrorist attack after they had defunded or attempted to defund Homeland Security or whatever, they would be blamed. It would probably it would be demagoguery, and it probably would be wrong, but it's a huge, God forbid if something happened. I mean, they should maybe game this out a little bit and think this through. It would be very, 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 very damaging to them politically, whether or not it actually, and it probably wouldn't actually have contributed to any of these events. So what should they do? I think you're right. Like, instead of playing defense and instead of being reactionary, reacting to Obama, letting him be the puppeteer, and letting him, sort of do something provocative, and then they predictably take the bait and spend time trying to get even. Why don't they actually try to just pass their agenda? Put him in the position of having to sign bills or veto bills. There's a lot of stuff we could do: tax reform, entitlement reform, whatever, some positive conservative agenda, and pass things, starting in January. You're going to have the House and the Senate. Why can't you pass conservative things and force the president to either be an obstructionist and to veto bills that would help the American public, or sign them and hey, great. That's,
I mean, that's what they should do. And I think you and I both talked about this before. They can't do it easily because they did not run on an agenda. They did not sit down in early 2014 and hash out their internal differences. So what if they did win a majority, they could say, okay, we've already pre-agreed on what the agenda should be, and we can hit the ground running on day one. They're not there. They're not at that point. They still have to figure out what that agenda is. And so with that vacuum, Obama stepped into the breach and has set the table ever since.
Well, there certainly are things that they disagree on, like immigration reform would be a prime example. But look, I mean, one supposes that there are plenty of things that Republicans would agree on in the House and Senate that you could pass bills on. So I don't know that the fact that they didn't have like a contract with America should be that concerning at this point. But to me, it's more a mindset of, are you going to respond to Obama and play defense, or are you going to go on offense? And before they, everything else is a moot point if they don't decide to go on offense. Right.
I mean, they eventually have to figure out how to get off. I mean, I assume one of these days they will come up with something. And I think that, they need to get out of this mindset, and maybe Boehner is there to some degree, but but Boehner's still sort of talking in the language of we're going to fight this. We're going to fight this order, as opposed to saying, let's try to win the argument about immigration with the public and fight it out on Election Day in 2016, because if we win the argument with the public and we keep the Congress and we win the White House, we can erase the executive order then. If this is on the books for 2 years and it goes off later on, the Republic will survive.
I agree, Bill. The best revenge is doing well. And Republicans, frankly, they can talk about Obama's executive overreach. They can run against that. They can vow to be different. And I think the overreach is an issue, as is the actual substance of the immigration question. But the point is, I understand the frustration. The question is, how do you stop it? Do you do you engage in a fool's errand, or do you actually do things that will allow you to change and reverse it? And so again, here we are again. Honestly, I'm having more of a strategic difference of opinion with some than a substantive difference of opinion.
I mean, there's certain things in this world where if you don't fight them immediately, then you can't undo them. Democrats, tacitly filibustered. I mean, they never got to the point of an actual filibuster, but they had the numbers to threaten it successfully. George Bush's Social Security privatization. If you privatize Social Security, you can't 2 years later unprivatize it. That would be a giant mess. So you got to fight it right away.
In fairness, it was allowing Americans to put a portion of their Social Security into a private account that they could manage.
However you care to describe it, it's not the kind that you can sort of do one day and then not do the next day. And I get Ted Cruz last year saying, look, if we don't stop Obamacare now, we're never going to be able to stop it. I think that was probably correct, because once it gets implemented to a large degree, it becomes very hard to undo.
But
unfortunately, your chance to do that was 2012 in defeating Obama, but you didn't get to do that. But this immigration order, this is not something that's so deeply embedded, because it's not a law. It's not a regulation that went through a long bureaucratic process. It's just executive action that is very easily undone. And so the fact that you lack good tools to fight immediately is an argument to not try to fight it immediately.
By the way, Bill,
at the ballot box.
I don't want to get bogged down on it because it's an aside, but I do disagree with Cruz's point, because they couldn't first of all, it's only valid if you say, if we don't stop it now, we'll never stop it. You still have to ask the question, can you stop it now? And if the answer is no, then should you try? And maybe the answer was still no. But the Supreme Court, could essentially defang Obamacare. So, like, the concept that it's impossible is, I think, empirically wrong, that it was impossible, because we very well still could have a situation where you have major aspects of the law come untethered, and then the Republicans would have an opportunity, I think, then to present a conservative alternative. So anyway, I said that as an aside.
Now, there's a lot of talk about Obama throwing his weight around. He not only on immigration, but he put the kibosh on this tax deal that was between Reid and the Senate Republicans. And so now they won't do these permanent extensions of various business tax breaks. They're having only a short-term tax break extension, and they'll have to revisit taxes next year. There's a Washington Post story today talking about how Obama's outreach is mainly to Democrats to try to make sure they help sustain his vetoes, as opposed to reaching out to Republicans a lot to pass other new things. But at the same time, Obama yesterday was at the Business Roundtable, which is a organization of the top CEOs, and he's talking up corporate tax reform. He's talking up trade, also talking up infrastructure, which he wants to tie to tax reform. But these are things that Republicans have an interest in. So it's not like he's not giving them any kind of olive branches. He is. I guess the question for Republicans is, do they? I mean, and I know McConnell and Boehner have both said they're interested in tax reform and in trade. Are they content just doing that, or to what extent do they really want to have a comprehensive alternative agenda that they know Obama's going to veto, but they at least could say, hey, we put it on the table. Here's the spending we would do. Here are the regulatory reforms we would do. Here's some of the social issues that we would try to address. There's a whole range of things they could try to plant their flag on. Are they going to be content, just like Obama, continue to set the agenda going forward? And the other thing that the New York Times highlighted that's going to complicate their ability to set the agenda is there's all sorts of deadlines coming up. There is a highway bill deadline on May 31st. There's a Patriot Act deadline on June 1st. They're going to have another, a government open deadline on September 30th, assuming that this bill passes. So they're going to be constantly tripped up in doing the minimum. If they can't quickly put some stuff out there that's outside of those issues and say, here's what we would like to do, given our druthers.
Yeah, I think. I was one of the people who argued that Republicans that it would actually be counterproductive late in the game, in October, to suddenly try to put forth a comprehensive agenda, that it would just be used against them, and that they could just win by running against Obama. But having said that, I certainly think that you need to believe in something. You need to have an agenda, and there could be real fights. You mentioned the Patriot Act. I think we talked about it here just a couple weeks ago. You had Rand Paul and Ted Cruz on the opposite side of a question that was essentially fixed the Patriot Act and extended it. And so now we're going to have this big fight, this big ideological fight with huge stakes in June.
If they don't resolve it by June 1, then the legal basis for both the metadata data program and the roving wiretap program, they flat expire. And I would be shocked if Boehner and McConnell let them expire. I mean, Rand Paul might be playing for time, trying to make them expire and gum up the works. I would imagine they would be able to overcome that and get something passed, but it's gonna be complicated to get from point A to point B. But that's an issue, at least, where I think the bulk of the Republican caucus supports the NSA, and they have, I think, enough support amongst Democrats to compensate for whatever loss of the Rand Pauls and the Justin Amashas that are out there. Highway bill is much, much trickier for them. That's straight up government public works spending, and they want to reform it. They want to shift power to the states. Democrats don't want to do that. They've been patched. No one wants to raise the gas tax because it's politically toxic. But that's what funds the Highway Trust Fund, or it has funded it for many, many years. And they've never been able to resolve this gulf of a view on it up until this point. But now they have this hard deadline that they're facing, And I just heard yesterday from Obama's budget director that they actually want to link corporate tax reform to the highway bill. And this is a controversial thing for progressives to swallow. They're talking about there being one-time revenues from corporate tax reform that they could use to expand the highway bill, to put in infrastructure. And that is most likely language to apply to repatriating offshore money. Multinationals park money offshore to avoid U.S. taxes. They're saying, let us bring it back to the U.S. at a one-time discounted tax rate. And there are bills in Congress that are bipartisan that say, okay, with that money that you're taking back, you got to siphon off part of it and put it in infrastructure. And the White House is not saying, let's make that infrastructure part of the highway bill, which puts it on a deadline to resolve both the tax reform question and the highway question. I don't know how serious a gambit that is, but the fact that the White House talked about, the budget talked about openly yesterday, says that they want to put some oomph behind that. And I have no idea how amenable the Republican caucus will be to pairing the corporate tax reform, which I think they would generally like, to the infrastructure spending, and there are folks on the left who are dead set against that repatriation. They think it's a giveaway to the multinationals. That's the example of how the game is rigged. That it'd be it's a few crumbs of infrastructure and a permanent tax giveaway to the multinationals, even though it's a one-time thing. They'll say they'll just play that game next time and they'll park their money offshore again.
So the left is saying, the left is saying that amnesty is like a magnet. Is that what you're saying?
It's who's getting the reprieve. It's all that matters, right?
Right. Well, look, they're both. It's disgusting to cover this business. No, there is. There's a lot of big issues,
and I have no idea the Republicans are gonna juggle all of that. So with all that to juggle, I think it's hard to find the space to put forth a positive agenda.
Yeah, and I think that Boehner needs to finish the job he started, which is, and by the way, let me say, I feel like there's a pendulum, right? So I definitely feel like at one point the establishment had too much power, and they were certainly corrupt, the Republican establishment, and they were corrupt, and they were big government, moderates. And then I think we maybe went too far to the other side, where there was kind of chaos and nobody in charge. And, so now I may be pulling for a little bit of leadership, but that doesn't mean that that's where I just think it depends on the moment. And right now, I think that conservatism and the Republican Party would benefit from finishing the job Boehner started, allowing, when he allowed the government shutdown in October of 2013, that had a chastening effect on the Republicans, and it kind of put them in line. And you ended up seeing, the irony is you sort of could argue that the shutdown helped Republicans because it chastened the Tea Party. And Republicans ended up being much more, I think, sagacious in the way they ran their campaigns, and they didn't do anything really terribly stupid or say anything crazy, and they ended up winning the midterms. I think that it's going to be very interesting to see how Boehner handles it. Does he now let the caucus get out of control again and let 30 or 40 or 50, backbench Republicans control the agenda, or does he shut that down? And I think he's gonna. I think he's gonna stand up to him. And but that's a huge. I think that's a huge question.
Depending on how the conservatives react to this shutdown aversion, might impact the votes he gets for speaker in January. He had a certain degree of drop off with Republicans, so he just narrowly became speaker in 2013. If there's a big drop off, he's got more cushion now because he got a bigger majority. If there's a big drop off for him, that might restrain Boehner's ability to use the iron fist. If he has a big vote, then he's got more running room.
I don't know who they would turn to. I don't think Paul Ryan or Jeb Hensarling would run against him, would want
No, it'd be like a rural Labrador or someone like that, I would imagine. Or maybe you just withhold your vote.
Well, I guess if the Democrats wanted to screw Boehner, but I don't know why they would. But if they all voted for Royal Labrador, maybe they could. Plus, Royal Labrador, but I don't know that he would do it. I don't. I think that he is. I think that my reading on Labrador is that that he's a more savvy politician. He's playing a little bit of a game here, a long game. I don't know that he would do that unless he. You don't. What's the whole? You don't go after the king unless you can kill him kind of thing. Like I think he would have to have. I think he would have to be assured that the coup would work before he would go for it. But I mean, there are others potentially, but I don't see it happening. I don't think Boehner. But stranger things have happened. Who knows?
Now, before we go, I do want to get your take on the Ben Carson boomlet. We've already had I think we already had a Huckabee boomlet last year. We had a CNN poll coming out for a presidential primary. Ben Carson coming in second, behind Mitt Romney with 10%, and then all the other, Christie, Rubio, Ryan, Walker, I don't know who else is on there. All those other guys, all single digits. I saw the Ben Carson infomercial they created a month ago. His right-hand man, Armstrong Williams, produced that. I mean, it's pretty low rent stuff. It was not. It was not a high class production. It really had that chintzy infomercial feel, but it's sort of gotten press attention. He's gotten booked on Fox and CNN a lot, I believe. His face is certainly out there. Are you feeling it? Are you feeling the Carson momentum in conservative corners right now?
I mean, yeah, it's real. It's real. It's just it's so disturbing. Look. I mean, we ought to acknowledge that he, is a great neurosurgeon, and, clearly a brilliant man, but I don't think he's ever been elected to anything. And he's only been really in the public, political sphere for a few years. And the fact that this is indicative of a whole bunch of problems within the conservative movement, in my opinion, still. And it's a very disturbing sign. I think it's real. If I thought it was bogus, I would be happier about it. I suspect that it becomes like a Donald Trump, Michelle Bachmann, Herman Cain type situation where, he's not going to be the nominee. But that doesn't mean we can't waste a lot of time talking about him. It doesn't mean he won't say some really crazy and stupid things that will tarnish the Republican brand, the conservative brand. And, maybe he ends up with a TV show or something at the end of the day. I mean, as if he needed it. He was already a contributor on Fox. So I just, look, the issues facing America and the issues confronting conservatism are so important. I just don't think we ought to be wasting our time on these kind of things. But I guess this is the world we live in. So.
Well, I do think an accomplished neurosurgeon is a step up from chain pizzeria CEO as far as impossible presidential candidates on the right are concerned. And I agree.
I don't know though. I think you maybe can make an argument that being president is closer to being a CEO than being a neurosurgeon. I mean, it's very depressing. It's very depressing, though. It is.
Right, I guess. I don't think he's going to be the nominee at the end of the day. But is he going to make? Is the 2016 Republican primary going to be another clown show?
Well, that's yeah.
They've tried to change the debate rules so that the RNC is going to have a tight grip on the debate schedule to try to avoid everyone being pushed to the right all the time. But they can't control who runs, right? I mean, if you're still going to have a bunch, none of these guys are going to run, but if they actually get support from, it's 10%, but you have this fractured field, 10% puts you in second place, you get a lot of media attention, you end up defining.
These things have consequences. I mean, Donald Trump's talking about Obama's birth certificate had consequences. I think Michelle Bachmann's presence in the race had major consequences. Remember, she knocked Tim Pawlenty out after the Ames straw poll, which is absurd, but it happened. He dropped out because she won that. And then she really teamed with Mitt Romney to take down people like Rick Perry. I mean, as if he needed any help being taken down. A lot of that was brought on by him, by his own failings. But, I mean, Bachmann was a significant player in that race, despite the fact that she didn't have a chance to win. And then her comments
examples of that.
About the Gardasil controversy. Remember, she attacked Perry for the HPV vaccine. Not only did that hurt Perry on the right, but it also, I think, continued to sort of harm the Republican brand additionally. So it's just, I mean, these things have consequences. They should not, we've had 2 cycles now where this has gone on. That was fine. Like, it would be nice for this not to happen again.
But those sorts of things, I don't see it necessarily as a negative. If you have a fringe candidate who can throw a successful punch at a top tier nominee and take that person down, that suggests that person shouldn't be a top tier nominee. You had in 2008 Chris Dodd, who got 0% in the Iowa caucuses at the end of the day. Early on, he's the one that put the knife in Hillary when she bobbled an immigration question. And that was the beginning of the end of the Hillary campaign. You had Al Sharpton in 2004 hammer Howard Dean on having no African Americans in his administration in Vermont, which I personally was kind of a cheap shot because Vermont. But
Bill, I used to agree with you. You're making a free market argument here, by the way. One that I used to make, which is that competition is good, that it sharpens people. I think we need a little more protectionism this cycle, only because we've had 2 cycles of the clown car, and it's gotten us nowhere. And I say us very loosely. Earlier today, you said that they're my party. I don't take credit for the Republicans, but they are close. Obviously,
you're a William McKinley Republican. You want to protect your own. You're deep down a protectionist.
Well, no, I mean, I'm at heart a sort of Hayekian free marketer but for this cycle, maybe just give me one cycle where this doesn't happen.
You're a George Bush conservative. I hate government bailouts, but this one time, this is such a dire emergency. Just this once.
George Bush. I listen to the Thomas Woods podcast from time to time. He was on my podcast recently, and he has these clips he plays at the beginning of the show, and one of them is Bush saying, it's something to the effect of, I had to go away from the free market system to save the free market system, something like that. Right. Yeah, it's. I guess what I'm saying is, for this one election cycle, yes, I will take that. Okay. I will take that tag, but just this one time.
Okay.
Because they need to.
You get your one pass. I'll give you your one pass.
They need to get their act together, man. They need to get their act together.
We should wrap it up.
All right. I could talk all day, but
I could talk to you all day, Matt Lewis, but work beckons. I have to do some actual work.
All right, buddy. Well, good talking with you as always, and check us out on Twitter at DMZ Show, and tune back in next week for more of our serious as well as lighthearted, depending on the subject, conversation and hijinks.
You'll experience the range of emotions. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll feel the ups and downs.
You'll become a part of it all. Yes.
Till next week, sir.
All right, man. Thanks.